Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rockingham Speedway, home to Thunder Valley as it plays host to race number 21 of the second season of the FTF Grand National Series presented by Barr Visuals. Tonight, Flatout Racing Network brings you coverage of the Speed Visions 200 at Rockingham Speedway. 123 laps getting set to be run here tonight. Seth Cole alongside of Anthony McCurry. Now, Anthony, we had back-to-back short track races. We're doing speedway racing here today, but in terms of just how abrasive Rockingham is on those tires, might as well be at a short track.
It might as well be. It's a little over a mile in length, but as you alluded to, if you were driving it, you wouldn't know. Going into turn 1 and into turn 3 is going to be extremely treacherous, and the corner exits of 2 and 4 equally as treacherous, as the turn 2 wall a lot closer than it looks when you're going full speed.
Brian Mercurio going to line up on the pole position for this one. Mercurio, of course, a couple of weeks ago at Nashville Fairgrounds was looking like a driver that was going to be able to take a checkered flag there, but hit the commitment line, if you will, the choose cone line. So he's trying to look for a little bit of redemption from a few weeks ago. Alongside of him, another former winner this season in Rudy Valentin. Valentin, the winner at Monza. Spencer Ray and Ryan Araki going to make up row 2. Nate Stewart is actually going to be in the 4 car here tonight. We're used to seeing him in the 13, but to get some owner's points there for the 4 teams' efforts. He'll be alongside of our points leader, former winner as well, in Jonathan Oates. Then in row 4, you've got Sean Butler and Matthew Zwack. Casey Nemitz in the field here tonight in the 52 alongside of Jack Painter. That is your top 10 here this evening. 123 laps there, Anthony. Obviously, a lot of times we go to tracks, we're used to it being, 100 laps, 150 laps, 200 laps, usually a rounded out number, but you got to wonder, an odd number of laps in 123. How's that going to play into pit strategy here tonight?
It's going to be a little bit different for these drivers. They're going to have to aim for a distance rather than aim for a lap number when you go into these odd numbered lap races, but as far as strategy goes, a little bit of tweaking, you should be okay, but we have a lot of drivers on the field. 34 of them to take the green flag. Speaking of, green flag in the air, we're underway here at Rockingham.
Ryan Mercurio looks to clear Valentin before they get into turn 1. He'll succeed in doing so. Leaves them to battle for 3rd place. That's Spencer Ray to the inside of the Bobcat Ford Mustang of Ryan Naraki. Down Thunder Valley they go. Looks like the 00 pulls ahead into 3.
Well, Jonathan Oates was pushing Naraki going down the back straightaway, had to back out of it going into turn 3. Out of 4 they come. Mercurio leads the first lap under heavy fire from Valentin, and back there you've got double wide racing between the 32, the 02, battling side by side. Now down to the inside of the racetrack, behind them you've got Oates, Painters, Wack, and Ichinoshu all in a battle for the 8th position.
Throw a blanket all over all those drivers in the latter half of the top 10 as the top 5 now make it 6. Get themselves single filed out. Casey Nemitz also going to clear. He'll move into 7th place, leaving the battle with the points leader 8th place on back here for spots inside of the top 10.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of work to do if he wants to get up to the front back there. Ishinoshu and Zwack almost had a little bit of contact, but going in through again, and so far so good throughout the rest of the field. The 818 of Parker has made up quite a few positions. He's now going underneath the 18 for the 11th position, now set to his sights in Ishinoshu for the 10th position. But ever since the start of the race, he's made up quite a few, and he's on a tear. One of the fastest cars on the racetrack is that 818.
One driver that probably was a little disappointed that we weren't a short track here tonight. That's Tristan Hagenstein, coming off back-to-back top fives at both Nashville and last week at North Wilkesboro. Right now up into the top 15, getting around Evan Rice. Of course, Evan Rice coming into this race is down around that cut line for the playoffs, and each week that we tick away is one less opportunity for drivers to be able to make or break their opportunity to get into that postseason.
Indeed, and this is a pretty epic postseason coming up, and a lot of these drivers are down mired around that cut line trying to get their way in. Something that's happening at the front of the field now, battling for the lead. Mercurio is now under fire from Valentine down to the inside, sends it in, does the 78, right alongside the 62, gets the position done, and now looks like Mercurio's going to have a double hit as Butler forces his way to the inside, going down the back straight away. He's lost 2 positions, has Mercurio.
We gave you the best seat in the house in that battle for the lead on board the 32 of Sean Butler. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I remember I mentioned that the only driver that was in the field that night, I think it was 2 weeks ago at Nashville, I said the driver that was in the field, the only one that had taken a green flag in the previous season at that track was Sean Butler. Well, it's the same case here tonight. Sean Butler finished top 10 here 1 season ago, bringing it home in the 4th position. As a matter of fact, race 21 here tonight, Rockingham Season 2. Rockingham was actually the 2nd race of the season back in the inaugural season of the FTF Grand National Series.
It's been a long time since Butler's been at this racetrack, but being the only one in this field that was in the initial season, this has got to be a little bit more experience in these cars, although these drivers, they might have had some practice in these cars in another series that they've run in with these cars, so not exactly a bit different on that front, but being in this series, Butler is showing that he's got some knowledge. He's running now 2nd place on the racetrack, started a fair ways back, now challenging for the lead on Valentine, and Valentine, what he's got to do to keep Butler behind him is he's got to think of what Butler will do. Butler's got the advantage of knowing how his car's going to feel over a long run in this particular setting, but Valentine right now doing good to hold off the 32's charge.
A couple of drivers we haven't talked about yet that are just outside of the top 10 that are trying to fight for playoff spots and also their first win on the season. Nathan Rabideau in the 93, currently running in the 13th position, and just behind him the 92 of Jordan Worth. So starting to creep their way up there towards the top 10 as we had some near contact back there in the middle of the back straightaway. I think that was Alan Balancino. He made some contact with Tucker Minter. Tristan Hagenstein just behind this as well.
Yeah, Balancino got a little bit unsettled going into turn 3, almost actually went down onto the apron, but did not. Came back on the racetrack just in enough time in order to save the car from looping around at the expense of the left side tires hitting the paint, but everyone gets to single file back there. We've had some double wide racing throughout the entirety of the race so far. Up in front, we talk about those drivers, Rapido and Worth. They're in front of a battle for a side-by-side battle, but now go into a side-by-side battle themselves for the 12th position. This is big for both of them, considering their spots in the points right now.
That's Worth on the inside. Looks like he'll complete the pass before they even get into turn 3. Lucas Palesel is the 45 now to the inside of Rabideau. That's for 13th place.
Good battle for 13th. Palesel has, I've been watching him throughout the last couple of laps. He's been able to put that 45 where he needs to. Right now running a bit of a middle line through the turn 1 and 2. I think he might have overdrove it just a slight bit. Now is actually going to cost him because here comes the 077 of Doucette to the inside trying to get the position done. He's going to bring a train of cars to the inside with him. And that's something typical that we see at Rockingham. The outside line barely works on a long run. You can do it when your tires are fresh, but now that we're seeing the tires start to get worn down, track surface becomes a bit much for these Goodyears to handle, and the inside line becomes the preferred line.
You talk about those tires wearing down as well. That's going to make turns 1 and 2 even more prevalent on the long run than it was in the early stages of this race. Rockingham, to me, is almost kind of like a reverse Darlington. Turns 1 and 2 have that much tighter corner entry and exit, kind of like 3 and 4 does at Darlington Raceway, whereas over here in 3 and 4, it's like the Darlington 1 and 2, a more faster, sweeping, regular oval type corners. And so don't normally have as much battling go on in that section of the track. The real difference makers over in 1 and 2. And we saw just moments ago, a couple of drivers, I think the 22 of Jack Painter, was pushing up the racetrack going into turn 1. So that's going to actually happen more and more, I think, with those drivers trying to make passes over in the first 2 corners.
Indeed they are, and especially with the run down the front straightaway that they have, it's a lot longer distance from turn 4 into turn 1 than it is from 2 into 3. So you have the momentum going down that way. You also have a little bit of it's not really a tri-oval, more or less it's a bit of a kink that goes down around where the timing line is. So you have to be careful in order to not overcook it going into turn 1, especially when you're battling somebody late in the run. That could also cause a couple of incidences that you and I have witnessed before when we go to Rockingham, where the driver gets a bit overzealous, thinking he's going to pass somebody in that turn, and then all of a sudden ends up washing up the racetrack. Speaking of, someone's in front of these leaders.
That's Chris Wetz in the 71. Yeah, we just saw him just ahead of the leaders coming off of turn 4. Now Wetz started this race from the 24th position, has dropped 10 spots since the green flag, and I'm not necessarily certain he may not have run into some slight issue here in the first 18 laps of this race. Obviously nothing that's brought out a caution, as we've stayed under the green flag since the start, but might have gotten up into the wall or something, because he's obviously lost a ton of spots and obviously is off the pace.
I'm going back to see if I can find what exactly happened to him, and so far I'm not seeing anything immediately obvious, but we'll check in on that and see what we can gather on that bit. But being one of the first drivers to go a lap down it's going to be a bit bittersweet, because you're going to have the ability to have a free pass if you do go a lap down, but you don't want to have to rely on something such as that.
Nate Stewart has gotten around Brian Mercurio, so move him up to 3rd place. Of course, he had that podium finish, 3rd place run a couple of weeks ago at the Nashville Fairgrounds. Mercurio in the 4th position, of course, splits that car with a number of other drivers, trying to keep that number 62 out of Speed Incorporated at the top of the owner's standings, coming into tonight over 700 points back to the 99 team out of Logitech G Altus Esports.
Indeed so, and I've just gone back and looked through the field, and the 71 of Wetz, the only thing that is immediate is that he's just off the pace. He's just not have the pace in order to keep up with the field, despite his decent qualifying effort. No contact was made, nothing. He's just a bit off the pace. Although something that did happen back around lap 2 to 3 was Andy Margot cooked it into turn 1 early on, got sideways, got a little bit of contact with the wall going into turn 1 through turn 2. So if you're looking around wondering why the 48 is off the pace, that's the reason.
Man, oh man, things got heated up there. I think both drivers blew the entry into turn 1. Both drifted up the track. Sean Butler, however, was able to rotate the center and get back to the throttle sooner. He's going to go to the point here on lap 23.
Beautiful overtake by Sean Butler. Is going to get the lead of the race, and now is actually starting to get away from the 78 of Valentine. You wonder if Butler had the fastest car on the track but was just being held up by the 78. So now that he's gotten around, he might be able to set the pace here tonight. As so far, Valentine hasn't been able to, hasn't lost the leader, but he certainly isn't keeping up as well as I thought he would be. Although that being said, the distance between the two relatively stays the same out at 4.
Yeah, right now, coming into this race, only 4 drivers who are competing, who are eligible for competing for the Grand National Series Championship, have gone to victory lane. Of course, Jonathan Oates last week at North Wilkesboro, Rudy Valentin back at Monza, and then we ended up having Jake Poulin and I believe it was, I'm trying to remember who the other driver was. I know Jake Poulin won at Daytona, and Talladega was Gary Waterworth. And those 4 drivers are all right now locked into playoff contention. Sean Butler trying to become the 5th driver eligible for competing for the championship to solidify his spot into the playoffs, with only a handful of races left here in the regular season. You talked about Andy Margot. He has been able to recover, still stay on the lead lap. Just moments ago, he picked up the 32nd position off of Robert Dorman, but only running about maybe 6 seconds ahead of these top 2 right now.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a critical situation for this team to pull themselves out of in the early runs of this race. And he didn't make a lot of contact with the wall, so the car is still up to pace with the rest of the field. Just a bit of a scary moment in the opening laps of the race as Robert Dorman has got a bit of a severe problem. He's pulled off to the apron of the racetrack, so something amiss on the 46 as he's now going slow through the apron of 3 and 4.
Out of harm's way as we take a look here in your shot. These are the drivers to look at on the long run. They've picked up the most spots since the drop of the green flag. The 10 of Tucker Minter there that we're focused on, and the 77 of Ryan Doucette just behind them. Both of these drivers have picked up 16, now make it 17 spots since the drop of the green flag.
Big moves through the field, and they've had to cut their way through a lot of tough competition in order to get there. Now battling nose to tail with each other, although might be using each other as a bit of assistance to get through the field as they've just gotten around Ishinoshu. Now looking at Naraki trying to break into 8th place is Mentor, and they're not too far away from the top 5 either, and they've certainly got the pace in order to get up there, but as we've seen the tires start to fall off late in the run, we're about a second slower per lap than we were at the drop of the green flag. Drivers still running considerably fast given the tire situation they're in. We're 30 laps into a run. We're getting close to what would be a green flag stop, not for fuel particularly, but for tires for sure, as a lot of these drivers are going to not only struggle for grip going into a turn, they're going to struggle with a bit of oversteer coming out of the turns.
We're riding here on board with Tucker Minter, 9th place position, and two things I'm observing here. Not a whole lot of hand motion, so obviously the car pretty stable underneath him. I would assume that we're not going to be seeing it quite as stable the longer this run goes on, because those rear tires are going to start getting hot and that rear grip's going to go away. But another thing I'm noticing, this track with that old surface, it is bumpy. So how much does that upset the race car?
Absolutely, a lot. It accepts it more than you think it would, given the fact that the suspension the way it is. The back end is more or less, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but in layman's terms, it's welded together. And something that you have to struggle with is going over bumps, because the rear end suspension is kind of all in one, where if you hit a bump, it lifts the entire back end of the car up rather than have individual suspension. So you hit a bump, and especially with worn out tires, it could send you for a ride. And we've seen a lot of drivers sometimes where they'll hit a bump and the back end will swing out and they have to catch the car. So old surfaces make for great racing, though. I always like seeing when these cars go at old surfaces, which is it's kind of bittersweet that we're going to see Atlanta get repaved for the next year's running of the season and the NASCAR season. But every time we get a chance to see these cars really whipping around an old surface, it's always fun to watch.
You want to talk about a guy that's good in the long run. Last time we checked in with Bolson and Brian Mercurio, he had dropped back to 4th. He's now back up to the race lead, trying to open up some daylight between himself and Sean Butler. So he didn't panic, very slowly recovered back to where he was after losing the race lead. And that is what's going to set different drivers apart from each other in terms of how well they're able to conserve those tires, keep their pace up for the long run. And I'm wondering as well, we don't know what the fuel window is for these guys, but I'm just wondering, speculating, if it can go far enough, do these drivers maybe look at splitting this race into just a one stop? Can you go 60 laps on these tires, do you think? Is it worth that kind of a gamble?
You might be able to. If you can get to lap 6, realistically, if you want to make this a one stop, around lap 61 to 62 would be your best bet to make it a one stop. That way you know for certainty that you can split the race in half. You don't want to be maybe half a lap to a lap short and have to make up that on the racetrack. Certainly, if you can do it, then absolutely do it. But with the tires, that might be a little bit more of a question than what the state of the fuel would be. We have a couple of guys diving down from pit road. I just saw it go down, so not really sure if those are scheduled or not, but nonetheless, we continue to run. And for Mercurio, you often wonder, what if he backed off a little bit intentionally? Now, maybe the initial back off wasn't intentional. Maybe it was a bit of a evasive maneuver. But imagine this. If he saw the situation he was in, decided, okay, now I'm going to start saving for the long run. You touched on it. Long run drive. This might be the drive that wins him the race.
Yeah, right now he has opened up 0.8 of a second back to Sean Butler. We're looking here at the closest battle up inside the top 10. 3 drivers, 8th, 9th, and 10th, Doucette, Minter, and Cosmo Shinoshu, as this Shinoshu takes a look here to the inside, down Thunder Valley and into turn 3. We were riding moments ago with Andrew Schwartz. Of course, Schwartz, formerly at the top of the point standings, lost the points lead to Jonathan Oates after his victory last week at North Wilkesboro. Only 27 points back, however, still has a shot to be able to get the points lead. He's picked up 9 spots since the start, but only up to the 18th position.
Yeah, he's got a lot of work to do if he wants to catch up to Jonathan Oates for that position. And Jonathan Oates, 4th place, now running down Valentine. Oates is another one of the fastest drivers on the racetrack right now. The last time by a 25.2. Valentine's lap of 25.4, so a couple tenths faster is this 73 over the top of the field. In fact, he's about 2 tenths faster than all 3 of our podium sitters at the minute. So, often wondered that momentum that he got last week when he won at a very spirited drive, that able to get his first win this season. I think you mentioned that it was his first win ever in this series. So having that bit of momentum on your side, he definitely wants to double down. And at the moment, he's on a good run to be able to do that as he's caught up to Valentine as they battle through lap traffic late in the first half of the race.
Yeah, lap traffic starting to come into play here. Race leader goes by the 04 of Tyler Lannon. That's Chris West in the 71 just up ahead. Andy Margot and Kyle Lawrence Short. They've gone a lap down since about 5 laps ago. And you mentioned a car diving onto pit road. Looks like it was a regularly scheduled stop. That was the 53 of Justin Malillo.
51's around.
And is that going to bring out a caution? He's down out of the way. I don't think this will bring out a yellow. It does, actually. Caution is going to fly.
So that changes the strategy up a little bit for these drivers that were trying to make it to lap 60. They might now consider coming down pit road to get some fresh tires. Certainly won't be able to split the race in half now, but it might be the best move.
Stay here with the race leaders, see what the strategy is going to be before we go back and see what happened to Kyle Lawrence Short to bring out the first caution of the day. Made it a third of the way through this race before our first caution waved here at Rockingham. And we're now going to see with pits open who comes down, who stays out. I'll be shocked if anybody stays out, to be perfectly honest. As looks like all the lead lap cars, they're heading for pit lane. Mercurio, Butler, Oates, Valentin, and all the rest of the drivers, 29 in total, that were on the lead lap when that caution flew.
Yeah, good move by a lot of these leaders to get the fresh tires. Not going to be able to split the race in half, but still, with the potential of the fuel run, they might still be able to make this in one stop, although the tires may not allow them to. Now, Lawrence Short, when he went around, I believe he was being passed by Oates when we were seeing him on our screen, and I want to bet he might have just gotten a little bit, well, as I look at it, it was a bit more sinister than just a little bit of looseness.
So right there, great battle off of pit road, but Mercurio by about half a car length, the number 1 pit stall gets him out ahead of Sean Butler. Tyler Lannon, by the way, got the free pass under this caution, and now we'll go back and see on the back straightaway what happened to the 51 car.
It was, well, somebody in our, one of our commentators at the FRM would call it gap whack, but this was certainly not that. I believe it was actually contact that was made between the 78 and the 51 going down the back straightaway. I want to bet that 58 didn't know he was clear, or 78 rather didn't know that he was clear.
And boy, that's great job there by Kyle Lawrence Short, not only to avoid hitting that pit wall, if you will, on the back straightaway, but then the inside wall heading into turn 3 as well. He did not make contact with anything else, so keeps at least his car in one piece. We'll hope to try and get that car back in the lead lap, maybe with the aid of a upcoming yellow flag, get the free pass, but we'll take another look at this slide by Kyle Lawrence Short on the back straightaway. And yeah, I'm almost wondering if it was a case of the 51 trying to turn left to make sure he didn't hit the outside wall, and to your point, didn't realize the 78 was already to his left rear quarter panel.
Yeah, it looked like a bit of a misjudge on positioning going down the back straightaway. Thankfully, to your point, good heads-up driving, fantastic save to make it so he missed one wall and then missed the other wall. calm, composed is what you have to have when you get into a situation like that. So no damage for Lawrence Short. And he had a pretty fast race car, although he was being put a lap down at the time, but have to see if he's able to recover from this after we go back to green.
And you see right there the reason the caution was thrown. The 51 was already into a spin up on the racing surface at the time. Had he spun down there below that yellow line, that would have been considered off the racing surface and we probably would still be under the green flag. But a lot of these guys that had been making a lot of forward progress, but then things got spread out, really liking the fact this caution came out, because now they're all benched back up and they can start to pick up more spots trying to move their way closer to the front of the field.
Indeed they can. You've got drivers such as Nate Stewart, Spencer Ray, Tucker Minter. You've got Jordan Worth. You've got Cosme Nishinoshu. You've got Wesley Parker, just to name a few, to get to the front of the field. But now we got Mercurio, Butler, Valentine, and Oates. That's your top four as we get ready to set them back underway. Lap 47 of 123. Safety car peels off. We're underway again, and Mercurio wasn't waiting around. This was a much better start than he got at the beginning of the race.
Butler's going to cut down in front of Oates, so he'll take second place into turn one. Oates and Valentin will battle for the third spot, with Nate Stewart on looking in the fifth position. Top six going to get single file. It's Tucker Minter and Spencer Ray. They're going to battle it out here. Ooh, almost some contact back there. Oh, and we got a wreck. That's Balancino in the 70. He got into the back of Cosme Nishinoshu, looped it almost around there in 3 and 4, but managed to save it. We stay under the green flag.
He's lost a lot of positions, now falling down to 28th is Balancino, but now recovered, and great driving on the part of the 70 team to keep us under green. Battling towards the front again, you've got Worth and Stewart battling in a side-by-side battle for what is the fifth position. Give it to Worth.
Tucker Minter there as well in the 10th.
Speaking of Stewart, sorry to cut you off, almost bended up into turn one, but has saved the car also.
Look how much out of the throttle he had to bail to make sure he made that corner. Was battling for fifth, now in danger of falling outside of the top 10.
And now he's gathered it back up. However, Nishinoshu catching up shortly, but keeping it off the wall did Stewart do, and that's going to be valuable. He's coming into this race to get some owner points for this 4 team. He's done just exactly what he needs to do. Keep the car going forward. That's all you need to do. Finish inside the top 10 for a better result.
Right now, Nate Stewart comes into this race 7th in the overall standings, so looks like he could point his way into the playoffs if he keeps this consistency up. Battle is on for the third position. At 92 of Jordan Worth, he is making strides. He has picked up about 3-4 spots since we went back green. He's now up into the podium and trying to hound Brian Mercurio for second.
He's got Mercurio in his sights, and you've got guys battling back for the 6th position. Give it to Minter and Valentine as they've now settled out to single file. Give the position to Minter, and then back behind you've got Spencer Ray and Wesley Parker battling. Parker moves up a spot to 7th place as they single file out yet again. And we were wondering what the situation was on the 4 team, and I think we might see it. His tires are definitely a little bit more worse for wear than the other drivers are, as now Nishinoshu's caught up, looking for the pass for 9th place.
As at any track that is a tire shredder, if you smoke those tires going into a corner, it takes you a long time to cool them back down and get the grip back that you had just moments ago. That thing is hard to handle when those rear tires especially are hot coming off of corner exit, especially over in 1 and 2. A couple of drivers that were up near the front in the beginning stages of this race have kind of faded out of the top 10, actually outside of the top 15. Nathan Rabideau, who started this race up in, I believe it was the 13th position and was up inside the top 5 in the first 15 laps of this race. He's faded back to 15th place. I've also noticed Ryan Doucette, who was making forward progress with Tucker Minter. He's mired all the way back in 21st. The reason being, he spent a good chunk of time on pit road under that last caution. I'm wondering if there was some damage repair that took place there.
Might have been some contact on the racetrack earlier on when they were battling side by side with a number of drivers trying to get through the field. Also might have been the result of a penalty, might have got caught speeding down pit road or whatever have you, but whatever the case is, for Doucette, it's dire moments right now. He's still got plenty of time. in the race, now cracking the top 20 as there's a spinner in front on the front straightaway. And we were just talking about him. Doucette's been involved on the front straightaway as a number of other drivers compiling in.
That's the Lannon machine, the 04 I just saw there. We're focused on the 18 of Matthew Zwack. He's got a lot of damage down there towards the inside wall. Nate Stewart in the 4, I believe, was involved in this incident as well.
Is he slow? There's a guy smoking in front of him. I believe that's Watersworth. Make that Zwack. Zwack is the one that's laying down the smoke on the racetrack. And you've got Waterworth, though, that looks like he's got some damage on his race car. I don't know if Andy Margo was involved or if he was just slow, but he's trudging along with this lot as well.
I'm going to hazard a guess that this might have possibly been the 84 and the 4. They were in close proximity and up just inside of the top 10. Cosmin Shinoshu and Nate Stewart. Let's see what happened here. Out of turn 4 and onto the front straightaway. Yep, the two of them make some contact, and just watch how this wreck culminates from just a 2-car incident into about 6, maybe 7 cars by the time they got down to turn 1.
A little bit loose getting off the corner, and that's what caused Shinoshu to go up into the 4. And yeah, there's just nowhere for anybody to go. They're at full speed going down the front straightaway, can't stop in time, and then everyone trying to get to the grass, get to the apron, get anywhere they can. Nate Stewart was caught in the worst spot for drivers to try to avoid him, as there was only a thin gap for anyone to really go in, and then you had everyone pile into the wreck that was happening in front of him involving Zwack and Shinoshu.
Did you see the shot that Ryan Doucette took in that 77? We'll be looking at him in just a moment, seeing how he got spun, but he perfectly hit the 84 of Cosmin Shinoshu, and he hit with quite a bit of force.
He did. I was actually looking back at him when it was happening. I saw him go through the grass and then wham, right into the side of the race car, and that caused Shinoshu to go back up on the racetrack and collect more drivers that were trying to get through it as best as they could, but and a lot of wrecked race cars in this one.
On board here. Oh, that is with Ryan Doucette. Thought the grass would be the safest place to go, and he thought wrong, directly impacting the 84 of Cosmin Shinoshu. And we're 60 laps into this race, closing on halfway. The bad news for all those drivers, a number of them taking some pretty hard licks. No faster pairs available to them here in FTF, and so therefore I think there's about maybe 4 or 5, maybe a half dozen drivers that we could say that's their race over 50% of the way through.
We've got Doucette on pit road. We've got Shinoshu on pit road. We've got Melillo on pit road. I didn't even see where he got involved, but Justin Melillo's on pit road with some heavy damage on the 53. Matthew Zwack undoubtedly done the engine giving up, and that will definitely take the 18 out of any contention. Nate Stewart, who is battling so well up inside the top 10, came in and trying to get some owner points for this 4 team, and the commentator curse got him. So would like to apologize on the part of Flatout Racing Network.
Well, Nate Stewart is also running well in the overall point stands. He's going to take a hit driver points wise here tonight at Rockingham. The recipient of the free pass under this caution, I believe, I wanted to say it was the 51 of Kyle Lawrence Sharp, but I'm going to double check on that one. Right now, we've got a total of 27 drivers that are scored on the lead lap, and Corey Suma is currently the last of those. So we'll follow up to see who indeed it was that got the free pass here under this caution in just a moment. But Sean Butler, he is going to be the race leader when we go back green. Jordan Worth got around Brian Mercurio just before that caution, so he restarts second. Mercurio in third, Tucker Minter in fourth. Fifth will be Jonathan Oates, then Rudy Valentin, Wesley Parker, Spencer Ray, Ryan Araki, and Casey Nemitz. That's going to complete the top 10. Now, we saw most of our leaders, actually all of our leaders, come down pit road 16 laps ago during our first caution. About maybe 2, 3, 4 drivers towards the back of the lead lap came down under this caution. Pretty much everybody stayed out. I would assume that we're going to probably see one more pit stop before now at the conclusion of this race, but I'm not necessarily certain because we didn't get an idea of just how far these drivers could stretch it. We didn't see a green flag pit stop before the first yellow came out.
And a lot of things in this race might play influence into whether or not they have another stop, especially if late in the race, if they get another caution with maybe, say, 30 laps to go, then I would have almost bet everything that they would come down pit road to get fresh tires in that state. But if they go green pretty much the rest of the way, to your point, it all depends on how long they can stretch it on fuel. The tires will definitely need to be replaced before the end of the race for some of these drivers, given the fact that we saw a lot of drivers a bit loose late in that run, especially trying to hold on to it, and the run previous to when they came down pit road for the first yellow flag. So that was about a 42 lap run on tires, maybe about a 45 lap run. So if that's any indication, then it's possible that they could stretch it all the way, but it would be a big ask and a tall order for a lot of these drivers to try and do it. But who knows? There's a lot of things that could play into it.
Looks like we should be getting the 1 to green signal this time by, so we'll be going back green next time around. And no, looks like the lights are actually still on atop the pace car. I'm assuming they're probably trying to get all the scoring and everything correct, get all the drivers that are either 1 lap down, 2 laps down, or even on the lead lap, get them into their correct positions. So we'll go around one more time. But, it's interesting because, Flatout Racing Network had the privilege to be able to call the previous Rockingham race back in Season 1. It was their second race of the season, as mentioned, and number of names that I saw that finished up inside of the top 10. You had Derek Justice and Michael Frisch. Derek Justice was the winner of that race. Of course, those two drivers racing the FTF Cup Series now. You also had Coke Series driver Blake Reynolds. But a name that kind of jumped out to me that I completely forgot was in the field that night was Raja Karuth out of the NASCAR Drive for Diversity field. He ended up finishing 5th place here 1 year ago. So a big name that kind of jumped out at me. I completely forgot that he was in the field. And you got to wonder, a lot of these guys are in the road to pro. A lot of the guys in the Cup Series in the road to pro as well. You got to wonder if there's any names we're looking at in the field here tonight that we might see make their way up the NASCAR ranks a few years from now. It's
very possible. You got a lot of drivers that have some good talent that could definitely hold their own against some of the drivers that are in the top series, especially in the iRacing side, and maybe even some of them maybe transfer over to the real world as well. Certainly drivers such as Butler, for example, he's proven week in and week out that he belongs at a top series team. He might not have the wins to show it, but he's consistent, running up towards the front week in and week out. Jonathan Oates, obviously, the points leader coming into this race. He was the points leader without winning a single race. So getting his first one at Bristol. It was Bristol, right? We were at Bristol last time. Yeah.
No, North Wilkesboro.
Oh, North Wilkesboro. My bad. I'm getting these races mixed up. But at North Wilkesboro, he took his first win, I believe, of his career. So some of these drivers, they come in with high hopes, and there's people watching. You might not think about it, but someone might see your performance and you get picked up by a big team or get a shot at a bigger series, and you never know. It could take you some pretty extraordinary places.
Sean Butler, 4th in the overall standings coming into this race. 1 pole position, 2 top 5s, 6 top 10s. And amazingly enough, coming into this race, it only led 62 laps this season. It spent a good portion of this race out in front. Pretty much been between himself and Brian Mercurio, but you've got Jordan Worth, who shows some good long run speed here in the first 65 laps. Same there for the 10 of Tucker Minter, who lines up on the outside of row 2. And don't count out our points leader, Jonathan Oates. You talked about it, got his first taste of FTF victory lane last week. He's hungry now to rack up more playoff points and maybe go back-to-back here in 2 separate weeks.
And then you've got Valentin will line up alongside of him, so top 6 right now, pretty strong within the top 10. Minter was one of those drivers we talked about earlier that had to fight his way up through the field to get into this position. So he's got to be pretty happy that he's in this position. Starting on the outside, not ideal for a restart, but we'll have to see what he can do in order to get to the front of the field. Safety car will pull off onto pit lane. We're getting ready to send them back underway. Butler, again, not wasting any time. Green flag back in the air. But Worth not letting him get away, tucks in line right behind as they go single file through 1 and 2.
Seems like the first 2 or 3 drivers are able to get themselves single filed out, leaving 4th place on back to battle side by side. That's Oates on the bottom, Minter on the top, Valentin looking on as now they're all going to get single filed. Wesley Parker with a big run to the back bumper of the 78. By the way, I checked, Andy Margot was the recipient of the lucky dog under this most recent caution.
So Now that he's back on the lead lap, we'll see what he can do to get through the field. Spencer Ray battling now with Ryan O'Rocky, getting around for the 8th position in the 00, a championship-winning 00 now. And if you see the sponsor on his car, you'll understand what that means. But now running along in the 8th position, back there, Casey Nimitz also with a big run. Ryan Araki falling backwards, going the wrong direction. Is that 20? Make that 02 machine. Not really showing much speed in the opening runs of this restart.
Well, his problem is he's not been able to get to the inside line. They were kind of freight training him. He started this race up inside of the top 10, 4th place. Faded back outside of the top 10 just prior to the first caution coming out. Has picked up some of the spots back, currently holding the 11th position. Further up, Tucker Minter hounding the back bumper of Brian Mercurio for 3rd place as Worth and Butler starting to open up some daylight on that 3rd place battle.
And they are moving along quite rapidly as Worth got the lead over Butler, and now Mercurio, Minter battling in quick succession. Further back in the field, you've got some drivers that are also in a bit of a battle right now. For the 13th place, you've got Schwartz battling right now with Valancino. Now Schwartz, we saw last week, he had to start quite a ways back through the field and then made his way up to the front, but then ran into some hardships late in the race. Now finding himself doing the same thing. So kind of started a little bit ways back in the field, working his way back up. Now in the 13th position is the 67, but still moving the right direction.
Trying to hold off the 70 of Alan Valancino, who had that great save over here in 1 and 2 earlier on in this race. Just ahead, Jack Painter looking to the inside of Ryan Araki. That would be for the 11th position. We do have our first driver out of the race here this evening, Matthew Zwack. Had a great run last week at North Wilkesboro. Started 6th, finished in the 3rd position, led 20 laps of that race and gained 3 spots in the standings. Was up to 8th, actually tied for 8th in the overall points coming into this one. He has taken his number 18 to the garage area. Right now, unofficially scored in the 31st position. So most of the spots he gained last week, he may lose them back here this week. Certainly not the run he was looking for coming into Rockingham with so much momentum.
Indeed so, and now having to mitigate the damage out of this outcome, and it's hard for a driver to have this kind of situation happen to them, because you know in the back of your mind they're always thinking, what could I do differently to make it better? But there's so many things that might be outside of your control in order to have something like that happen to them. But still on the racetrack right now, everyone continuing to now run a bit more single file. I think they've seen what's happened early in the race and might have tried to settle it out a little bit, although the tires might be starting to wear off. And looking on the racetrack at the moment, a couple of drivers that we saw that were making their way to the front but then fell back and now making their way back to the front again. Nathan Rabideau now in a 10th place position, trying to work his way through the field. And we were talking about the drivers that had to go to the back and now try to work their way back to the front. I think Rabideau was one of the biggest examples of that, but Tristan Hagenstein was always running at the back, but now trying to get his way back to the front even more than he was earlier. He's running in the 19th position, now trying to get around tire landing for the 18th position. Now Hagenstein, he's had some pretty good runs. This is a bit uncharacteristic to see from the 2017.
Well, we talked to him last week after his 2nd straight top 5 finish, and he said, man, I wish the rest of the regular season was all short tracks. We got some smoke there coming to pit road. Not certain who that was.
Might have actually just 51.
Yeah, I think it was either Kyle Lawrence Short diving onto pit lane. Either that or it's a driver that's currently sitting on pit road, possibly smoking, and there might be some wind carrying the smoke from the machine over there to the turn 4 exit. Don't see the smoke there this time around, so might have possibly been from the 51 as you alluded to. But I just lost what I was talking about coming into that topic just before I saw that smoke. Well, anyway,
this has been brought to you by
whatever it was very important, and I'll probably think of it much later on. Oh, there it is. I remember it now. We were talking about Tristan Hagenstein. He was saying, he's really good at the short tracks, and he was really glad to get that momentum, but he wishes that it was short tracks for the remainder of the regular season. So, you know, obviously he's got himself in a good position to make it into the playoffs right now. He's up to 5th in the overall standings. Now at some of these upcoming racetracks, you know, we got Rockingham here today. Next week we're going to Tsukuba for the 3 races in the Tsukuba Nationals. There could be some tracks now that he's going to be going into that's just all about survival and preserving that spot in the overall standings, preserving that playoff position.
Indeed. And, you know, the season coming up still is going to be a bit of a challenging one for a lot of these drivers, but as you alluded to, Hagenstein, knowing that he will struggle at some of these tracks, and he's said that he does struggle at these tracks, he's now, again, in damage control throughout the rest of the season, although he's got some races coming up still to come in this season that might favor him. Martinsville is the second to last race of the season. He might be able to have a good run there. Richmond we got coming up shortly. We have, even though that it's not really a short track, it kind of drives like a short track in a way. You've got, well, I take back that statement because I just went through my brain seeing how Darlington runs, and I'm going to retract that statement. But still, Darlington is akin to this track in a kind of way. So some drivers that are doing good tonight might take that momentum to Darlington when we get there, but we still got a long ways to go before we get to that point. But season coming down to an end. A lot of these drivers on the cut line trying to make their way into the championship. A number of them are in the championship without a win so far this season. So a lot of storylines going into our final races of the regular season.
You talk about that cut line, and we would have to talk about our current race leader, Jordan Worth. A couple of weeks ago, when Flatout Racing Network came on here to begin coverage of the FTF Grand National Series season, he was outside of the playoffs. He was outside the top 16 in the overall standings. Since then, though, he has been on a tear. He has had 3 straight finishes inside of the top 6, kind of almost Jonathan Oates-esque in the consistency that he's shown the last couple of weeks. Has now moved his way up into, I believe it's 17th position. He's only a couple of points out of a 2-way tie for 15th place, and he's showing the way in this race. No doubt about it, if Jordan Worth closes out the deal here today with his first career FTF Grand National Series win, we're looking at another future playoff contender.
And that would be big because then it moves a couple of drivers that are behind him up a spot. It'll move some drivers that were in front of him down a spot. So that plays into a huge point shakeup coming out of this race. You've got other drivers that have just made their playoff hopes a bit more crystal clear, as Jonathan Oates, again with that win last week, will solidify his spot. He came in as the points leader, but will solidify it with the run he had last week. The guy in second place, Sean Butler, if everything holds true, he should be in the postseason, but not a win yet this season, so trying to get a win to solidify that deal.
Yeah, right now, a lot of guys that haven't won yet, like Andrew Schwartz, Nathan Rabideau, Sean Butler, Tristan Hagenstein, Cosmo Nishinoshu. I mean, all these guys look like people we're going to be seeing battle for that championship, and they've got to feel that they also look like they are in good shape to be able to make it into the playoffs. Now it gives them the opportunity to kind of take some risks, play some strategy, get some victories, because they want to rack up as many playoff points as they possibly can when we get to that first round.
Indeed so, and that first round being, if I'm reading this correctly, that first round being Daytona. So
yeah,
having Darlington being the cutoff race and having Daytona being the first race, and you have a quite big a gap between those races. You go to Darlington, then they take a week off. Then you go to Daytona, and then they take 2 weeks off. So one race in a month span. It's going to be a little bit of a shakeup for these drivers by the time they get to Las Vegas, because everything that you had done in that Daytona race, you're not going to have to wait a couple weeks to carry it over into Vegas. And then, oh, by the way, we've got Coca-Cola on the schedule, which is a behemoth of a track.
What just happened? We had about almost a second from first back to second. Now you can throw a blanket over 4 drivers as Butler, Mercurio, and Minter drop Worth from the lead back to the 4th position.
I'll tell you what just happened. Jordan Worth had something awful happen to him going into turn 1. Goes in, and I think that he just flat out slowed down. I don't think that there's anything that he did wrong. That car is just not up to speed anymore. Don't know if the tires have gone away on him or whatever have you, but he's dropping positions like a rock right now. He's under fire from Jonathan Oates now, going to the inside into turn 1, and now battle for the lead between Mercurio and Butler as they go door to door through turn 2 on the way out. Who's got the advantage right now? It's wall contact, now falls back to third place as Butler.
Sean Butler gonna make a little bit of contact with the right side of his Pennzoil Mustang off of turn 2. That drops him from the lead now back to second. Tucker Mincher moves on by, and we got a driver ducking for pit road. So we know these guys apparently cannot make it the rest of the way without one trip to pit road. And Worth, who was dropping through the field as the first one to begin a green flag cycle.
That might be due to the fact that the tires are starting to go away on these drivers. Maybe that was what's causing him to lose all that time. Certainly going to be a 4-tire stop with fuel. And with this stop now, he will be able to make it to the end of the race. So how much...
Oh, got a wreck! Coming to pit road. Sorry to cut you off. Nathan Rabideau and Wesley Parker got together on the entrance to pit lane. No caution going to come out for that, but that is huge for Rabideau, who was up inside of the top 10 just before he hit that commitment line.
Yeah, and that was on the way in. The 818 was already spinning down, and I think that Rabideau just couldn't go up in time in order to avoid it, but Wesley Parker now finds his stall as everyone continues to run around the racetrack. The leader's still out. No one else is elected to come down pit road yet. I'm looking at my telemetry. I believe the 90 now has come down pit road. That would be Bryce Andrus.
Yep, that's going to be from the 23rd position. Tyler Lannon, who got the free pass a couple of cautions ago, he's now on pit lane. We're still waiting to see some of our front runners when they're going to duck onto pit lane. And folks, if you're wondering just how much time you can gain with fresh tires as opposed to old, drivers right now are out there running high 24s to low 25s. Most of these drivers, their fastest laps of the race were either high 23s or low 24s. So there's about a second, maybe a second and 3/10 to be gained with fresh Goodyears.
And you wonder what that's going to do for Jordan Worth. The undercut can be powerful, and he came down pit road a good handful of laps before anyone else. If the leaders have decided to come down pit road, still no one else from the lead group of cars indicated to come down onto pit lane. Mercurio still now leading the way. He's gotten around the 51 of Kyle Lawrence short. Now still rotating around the track. Not any indication that the top 5 has even thought about coming down pit road.
Minter was the fastest of the top 5 that time by. Jonathan Oates the second fastest as he's back in the 4th position trying to reel in Sean Butler. Now, if you're Jordan Worth, you've got to have this thing remain under the green flag from now to the finish, or at least until the green flag pit stop cycle around, because he has been trapped a lap down. Rockingham, not exactly a big track, so you will lose at least 1 lap when you come into pit road in green flag conditions. Right now, second car 1 lap down behind Nate Stewart, currently Jordan Worth in the 25th position. But to your point, Anthony, if we do cycle this around, going to be interesting to see where the 92 finishes out. Would he be back up at the front, or would he actually have lost some ground after maybe not being as aggressive coming onto pit road as he should have?
Maybe so. No, well, only time will tell. We have a long way to go still. We're about ready to hit to lap 100. Does they have enough time is the question. 124 laps certainly sounds like a tall order, or we'll make that 24 laps. I don't know why I was thinking that we had 100 to go, but 24 laps, that might seem like a short time around this track. It is, but it is quite a bit of time that you can make up. Now the question does become, for those drivers that pitted early, how much...
Oh, Jonathan Oates saves it on 1 and 2. My goodness, that was close.
And now it's time to come down pit road.
Yeah, those rear tires, they are smoked with that slide into the first couple corners there. Tried to drive it deep to the inside of Sean Butler for third. They made some contact. Fortunately, they both managed to keep it straight, but yeah, it's definitely time to come to pit road, get some fresh Goodyears there for the 73. Casey Nemitz in the 52 has just ducked onto pit lane. We're expecting some more here in the next 5 laps.
You want to know, maybe some of these drivers are trying to stretch it as far as they can. That way they can spend as little time on pit road as possible. Now, we never considered this, but do you think that some of these drivers might try the splash of fuel and a right side tire strategy? Because earlier in the race, I didn't think that it might be possible, but given how far these drivers have been able to go, 2 tires might be the way to go.
You know, some of these guys might be brave enough to do it, but if you asked me about 75 other tracks, that
Whoa, the
question, I
53's
would
in the wall.
probably say yes. Is Justin Malello able to keep his car going after pancaking the right side? But this is Rockingham we're talking about, maybe one of the most abrasive tracks out there on tires. I think that's a risky move to just go with the two-tire strategy.
Especially seeing how ill-handling these cars are at the end of this run. They've been out on track for a long time that these drivers have. So Oates is definitely one of those drivers that might consider getting 4 tires, even though that it is late in the run. It's so hard to gauge what these drivers are thinking, and it's shocking to me that some of them have stayed out as long as they have. Now, certainly I would have thought that when Worth came down pit road, then there would be a lot of drivers to follow him. That hasn't happened, and I gotta say, it's a bit jarring seeing how long they've been able to go, because I'm looking at the run. Most of these guys are on a 60-lap stint, so if we wanted to know if they could maybe half the race, and that was a definite. They could have halved it if we got into halfway, but how long can they go beyond that is the question.
Well, here's the thing I'm noticing. I don't know if maybe traffic is contributing to this or not, but the fresh tires of Jordan Worth are running maybe 0.2 faster, if not equal, to what Brian Mercurio on 60 lap old tires is running. So it's not gaining nearly the advantage that we originally thought.
Worth has now had to go through an immense amount of traffic. He's had to put about, I'd say that's a good 7 cars down a position that he had to get through. And now you can see the speed difference now as he's gotten clear. He's putting down some banger laps at this stage of the race. His fastest lap so far was a 23.7, which means that he's got the fastest lap of the race as a whole right now. Everyone else a little bit off from that. I think the next closest to him would be Butler with the 23.8. So certainly a bit of a tear at the moment, but he's got a lot of traffic in order to get through. Still the leaders, still out on pit, or make that not coming to pit road. And Seth, I gotta ask, with how abrasive this track surface is it worth staying out with the older tires because you know how they're gonna handle? Now they are running low on wear, but at least you know how they're gonna handle.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting, the fact that we are now entering into 15 to go and these guys have not come to pit lane. That says to me that I think some of these guys are planning on running this thing out to the finish. I don't know what their tires currently look like at this point in time, but the pace is obviously back down. The more conservative you are going into these corners, the less fuel you're going to consume on a lap, so they might be able to make it on what they've got in the tank. It's just all now about who's got how much rubber underneath them in the closing stages. Tucker Minter made a charge there on Brian Mercurio moments ago, then kind of dropped back about 5 car lengths, now starting to close back up here again. And he's going to get Andy Margo. He's going to loop it around here on the front straightaway. He's going to collect the 48 again. Look out into turn 1. No caution, however.
Minter saves it on the way back onto the racetrack. The 48 of Margo. Well, he was a...
That was Gary Waterworth, sorry, that he made that secondary contact with.
He just now got back on the racetrack after spinning down to the inside.
There's caution. Caution is out. And I'm assuming this might have been an admin thrown caution for the incident that took place on the front straightaway.
It was a multi-car incident, even though that was off the racing surface. That I think that there might be a rule in this series where if it's a multi-car, they throw it, but we are now under yellow flag, and this couldn't have come out at a worst/best time for the leaders, because now they'll be able to come down pit road and get fresh tires and not risk losing so many positions under green flag conditions. Bad news is, if you're Worth, you are now on much older tires than the leaders that are coming in. So what do you do if you're Worth?
And I think Worth, don't think he was in the free pass position. I think Andy Margo was in the free pass position. Now, Worth would be able to take a wave around, but to your point, yeah, he's not going to be able to come down pit road if he takes that wave around. That's 19 lap old tires, so absolutely not what Jordan Worth was looking for here. He wanted to have this thing cycle all the way around if these guys could not make it on fuel, and No surprise, every single driver on the lead lap is coming down to the attention of their pit crews right now. I think it's pretty safe to say we could dub this the money stop.
Oh, Butler almost jumped Minter on the way out of pit road, almost got the advantage, and then 73 of Oates short ways behind, and then Valentine comes out right behind them. So the top five remains pretty well the same. Spencer Ray gets out in sixth place. Schwartz now jumps up to seventh place. That's a big change for the 67.
Look here at the incident. There's the 12 of Gary Waterworth getting the follow-up contact as Minter was trying to hang on to his machine. This is what brought the caution flag out. Minter, however, did not hit anything. And somehow, because he and Mercurio have been able to build up a pretty sizable gap between themselves in third place, managed to recover his machine and still hang on to second place, where he currently still runs after coming down to the attention of his crew. So talk about dodging a bullet there.
Absolutely. Now, he does have some rear-end damage as we look at it live. I don't know if that's physical damage or if it's cosmetic because of the coating not knowing how to handle it, but either way, that 35 does not look healthy, and if it's rear-end arrow, we know how tough this track is for grip. It's definitely going to hurt his car if there's anything even remotely broken on that rear end. Have to see if he can hold on to it for these last few laps. We're only going to have less than 10 laps to go when we go back to green flag racing, so it's now crunch time for these drivers, especially if you've gone this far, you've been able to make it. Now you just got to close out the deal, and a bit of late race drama here at Rockingham suits the conditions.
Absolutely. Looks like we've got a total of 5 drivers that will not reach the conclusion of this race. Robert Dorman and Kazuma Shinoshu, they're still being scored in this event, but they have spent almost half an hour for Kazuma Shinoshu, almost 45 minutes for Robert Dorman on pit road, getting repairs done to their machines. Officially out of the race, Bryce Andrews, Matthew Zwack, and Ryan Doucette. So it looks like 29 drivers will be taking the green flag when we come around this time. Right now, 23 of them on the lead lap. 5 drivers took the wave around. Correction, 4 drivers took the wave around and are back on the lead lap. Jordan Worth, Nathan Rabideau, Gary Waterworth, and Nate Stewart. Some of those drivers have only 13 laps on their tires. Some of them, in the case of Nate Stewart and Gary Waterworth, they've got over 50 laps on their tires. So you know that they're definitely thinking on a quick yellow coming out here, so that way they can come down, get some fresh tires, and be on equal footing with the rest of the field. Brian Mercurio, the race leader, as Tucker Minter is actually going to drop towards the back of the pack there. But Mercurio, Butler going to be the front row. Oates, Valentine, the second row. Spencer Ray. We haven't talked a whole lot about Spencer Ray. How about him filling in there for Jake Poole in here tonight? Nice run for the Tampa Bay Lightning Toyota as he holds down 5th to the inside of Andrew Schwartz in row 3. Brett Pancari, there's another name we haven't talked about all night long. He's now up to 7th alongside of Alan Valancino, Seth Noel, and Ryan Araki. That is your top 10. There's about 3-4 guys that I don't think we've even talked about here tonight that are up here late in this race with a shot of leaving here not only with a top 10, maybe a top 5, or depending on what happens here in these final 8 laps, maybe even a race victory.
And a little bit more dramas. I think that Andrew Schwartz might have actually disconnected from the server. He's fallen all the way down to 23rd with no intention of getting any higher, and I don't think he's come back into the session. So that's not very well on the part of the 67 team for their hopes for the championship. But about ready to go back under green. Butler, Mercurio gets us underway again. Mercurio, a good jump yet again. Gets to the lead of the race. Butler to the inside, make that the outside defending. Here comes Jonathan Oates. He's certainly looking like trying to go for 2 in a row.
Couple of blue ovals for second place, chasing the Supra of Brian Mercurio. And you got another Toyota there in 4th place. That's Rudy Valentine, who almost pushed up into the left rear quarter panel of Sean Butler. That's going to be the side-by-side for 3rd. Update on Andrew Schwartz. Looks like it might have been connection problems that plagued him. Has dropped him now off the lead lap. He has not returned back to the server, so tough break for a guy that was scheduled to restart.
Whoa!
Up into the top 10 as we got some contact off of turn 2.
That was Butler and I think Spencer Ray making contact going down the back straightaway, but now Ray gets out in front. Butler stays behind. He's now under fire from Balancino. How about Balancino getting back into this position after what happened earlier in the race?
He currently holds down sixth. Right behind him, Brent Pancari. Remember, I mentioned that there were two drivers that had won this season at super speedways, that Jake Poulin won at Daytona. That was correct. I don't remember who I said ended up winning at Talladega. I think I got the name wrong. Actually, it was Pancari who won at Talladega. So right now, he's locked into the playoffs and having a solid outing right now in seventh. How about Seth Noel there as well? That 54 holding down the 8th position, trying to keep away from the 0-2 of Ryan Araki.
And then behind him, you've got Painter in rounding out the top 10. Tristan Hagenstein has now found his way back up to 11th. So great run after everything that happened earlier in the race. He's found his way back up into a potential top 10 if he can put a run together. And that's good news for him if he wants to keep the momentum up and alive. Ooh, he might have a chance. This Painter washed up the track a little bit. But up in front, it's now Mercurio and Oates. Oates catching up to Mercurio after, I believe, after Tucker Minner had to go back to the back of the pack. Not sure why he had to. I think it might have had something to do with the earlier incident. He might have had to EOL.
Yeah, he's dropped all the way back to the 18th position. Has not made a whole lot of forward progress since that restart, as we're going to be coming around for 2 to go. It's going to come down here, it looks like, between two drivers that have something in common. Jonathan Oates is your current points leader in the Grand National Series. Brian Mercurio, the former points leader in the Cup Series. He lost the points lead after some hardship last week at Road America, but both of these drivers have at some point here this season led the points in their respective series, and it's going to come down, I think, between these two for the victory. Maybe 4.5 car lengths between these two as Mercurio comes around to see the white flag at Rockingham.
1 lap to go here around the rock, down into turn 1, inside line, packs it in a little bit out onto the middle of the racetrack, but steams out of turn 2. Jonathan Oates just not close enough to make any run. A good bit of distance between them, about half a second between the two of them, is out of turn 4 for the final time. Brian Mercurio has gotten through the hardships of the rock and will win here at Rockingham.
Brian Mercurio taking the checkered flag in the Speed Visions 200. Another time the 62 car goes to victory lane here in the FTF Grand National Series, presented by Barr Visuals, and Barr Visuals gets to go to victory lane here courtesy of the 62 as extracurricular activity there in Thunder Valley. But Brian Mercurio, he's getting pretty accustomed to doing some burnouts here in the Grand National Series, and he's about to come down here in front of these North Carolina fans and get ready to light up them Goodyears.
He had a really good run that last bit. He was always running really well throughout this entire race and then found himself in a good position late in the run, got back to the lead before the last restart, never looked back, burning it down in front of the fans. Those tires definitely going to be worn out at the end of this one, so... But yeah, getting accustomed to doing this, and you got to give credit where credit's due. He had a perfect drive, almost a textbook drive, rather. Kept his nose out of trouble, had a winning strategy, never really looked back once he got into the lead, and that's what he had to do in order to win this one.
Brian Mercurio getting to burn it down for the 3rd time this season, and it's the first time that he has gone coast to coast. Started on the pole and picks up the victory in the same night here at North Carolina Speedway. Pulls into victory lane there, just in the infield grass on the front straightaway, and as he begins the celebration, we'll be talking to him in just a few moments. Let's take a look at the official results from tonight's event, and as mentioned there on that final restart, a lot of names that popped up in the closing stages that we didn't really see most of this race, but a lot of the constants finished up there inside the top 5. Mercurio, Oates, Valentine, Ray, and Butler. They were pretty much up inside the top 10 the entirety of this 123 lapper.
Yeah, they never really kind of left the top 10. A couple of these drivers did fall back a little bit, but due to restarts and battling on the racetrack and a bit of a pit road shakeup. But yeah, solid outing for a lot of these drivers, but someone that did end up getting his side at the very last minute, despite having some earlier problems, was Balancino. He fought his way through the field, had a bit of a spin recovery earlier in the race, and ends up now in a 6th place position after all said and done. Brett Bunkari makes his way to 7th place. Ryan Naraki makes his way to 8th. Seth Noel finds his way into the top 10, and Jack Painter holds on to a 10th place position to round out the top 10.
Taking a little bit further down here, and some of the names that kind of jump out at you that looked like they were in line for good runs, and unfortunately in the final half of this race it was not the case. Tucker Minter down there in 16th. Jordan Worth was hoping that pit strategy would work out in his favor after spending a good portion of this race out in front, out in that clean air. Got trapped a lap down with the timing of the final yellow flag, finishes in 18th position, and Nathan Rabideau there in the 93 as well, a driver that's been running very consistently this season. Been very good the last couple of weeks, up there inside the top 5 in the overall standings, 20th place here tonight. So maybe some uncharacteristic runs for some of the guys we're used to seeing finishing up inside of the top 10, but that just makes the whole who's going to get into the playoffs scenario heading down this home stretch even more intriguing. Andrew Schwartz, connection issues have him 9 laps down, finishing in the 29th position here this evening.
And some of these drivers never made it past halfway. A lot of them, such as Matthew Zwack, Ryan Doucette, Kazumi Nishinoshu, they went out of the race, unfortunately, because of some contact, and Robert Dorman, who only made it to lap 29 in the 46 machine. But a lot of these drivers that conquered here today at Rockingham are going to set themselves up for the next stretch of races. We have a pretty interesting one coming up, including a trip to the Sabuki Nationals. We got Richmond, then Indy, but the road course, Michigan, Mount Panorama, and Darlington. That's the remaining schedule for the regular season, and then we set the field up for our championship run. And for these drivers that had good runs that were trying to get their way into the championship, and some of them that are just trying to hang on to a championship spot at the moment, the Rock kind of paid out some good things for them, and some of the drivers not such good things.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next week with the ups and downs we had of different drivers here tonight, as we're going to have 3 races next week in the Tsukuba Nationals. It's going to be a lot of fun at that very winding road course, but let's see if we can talk with some of our podium finishers here tonight at Rockingham, and let's kick things off with a driver who went to victory lane a couple of weeks ago at the crazy track of Monza and brings home 3rd place here tonight at the Rock. That's Rudy Valentin. Hey Rudy, it's Seth and Anthony up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you.
Man, great run for you here today. Kept your machine up there inside of the top 5 pretty much the entirety of this race. We saw that late race yellow come out. What little more did you need out of that 78 car to be able to get up there, battle it out with the 62 and the 73, make it a 3-man fight for this checker flag here tonight?
Well, I'll just tell you, tires. That's all I really needed. And a little bit of fuel to make it a little bit looser. That's about it.
Yeah, you certainly had a good run throughout the entirety of the race, and you mentioned tires. We know that tires at this track are a bit of a premium, but how was it when the run went on? We were speculating if that first caution hadn't come out, then a lot of these drivers might have been trying to do a one-stop strategy. Was that on the table, or were these cars a bit too unstable that late into a run to make it a one-stop strategy?
So I was gunning for 2-stop this entire race because I knew I couldn't save that long enough to make it viable to do 1-stop. As you probably saw in the beginning, I ran into the lead for about 30 laps and then got freight trained. Yeah, I'm just not really good at saving tires, but I mean, great finish. I mean, thankful for the caution that came out, but it sucks for whoever was involved in it.
You know, we saw obviously a couple of drivers dive onto pit road, and we were thinking, you know, more than likely everybody can't make it on what they've got in the tank. Then we started getting to 15 laps to go, and a lot of the race leaders were still staying out there, and we were starting to think, well, maybe they actually can save enough to make it at the end. So how close was it? How many laps were you short, and when were you planning on maybe making that final pit stop had we remained under the green flag?
I think if we ran green, it would have been 80 or 90 laps of fuel. I took fuel every single pit stop just to make it looser. I wasn't close to running out, but I think if we went green that first stint, it would have been around 80, 90 laps, maybe 100. I can't tell you.
Well, obviously, Rudy, we saw you go to Victory Lane a few weeks ago at not Nashville, make that Monza. We then went to back-to-back short track races, Nashville and North Wilkesboro. And while you were very competitive, some late race incidents didn't get you the finishes you were looking for. So how important is this as you're trying to make enough starts to be able to get into the playoffs in about 8 weeks' time? How important is it to get a finish like this here tonight at Rockingham?
Very. I mean, from what I'm hearing, I need to be here, finish in the top 5, top 3 around here every single race to be able to point in. But I don't think, unless I win another race, I don't think I'm gonna make it in.
Well, we certainly are looking forward to watching, seeing if you might be able to pull off that upset and get yourself a playoff spot here. Still a good number of races left to go, some challenging tracks coming up, so we wish you luck on that. Congrats on a great run here tonight at Rockingham. We're now going to give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Well, I just like to thank out my team, Painter, Slipstream Racing, and First Four Racing. Slipstream signs, the special shout out to the Brian Hicks driving experience, Puffer Zone Network, and OSRL.
Well, Rudy Valentin brings it home P3 here tonight in the Speed Visions 200 at Rockingham Speedway. Congratulations, Rudy. Best of luck next week in the Scuba Nationals.
Thank you very much.
Let's see if we can dial up our second place finisher, your points leader, last week's winner, Jonathan Oates. Hey, Jonathan, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yes, I do.
Man, the consistency, it just keeps on rolling on. You tasted Victory Lane last week, had a shot to maybe be able to go back-to-back here in the Grand National Series, but it just kind of looked like you couldn't get to his back bumper. What was it you were lacking there on that final restart?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was just outright pace. Brian was faster than me on the short runs. He was faster than me on the long runs, and that wasn't really going to change with a green-white checkered. The steering ratio and the brake bias I was using was definitely geared towards the long runs, so it was a lot harder for me to try and push more on the shorter runs. Maybe if I had a couple more laps, I would have been able to get up to him, but to be honest, I just think he was faster than me. So we just lacked pace. There wasn't really anything I could do about that, but we were still really strong all race. I think definitely the best out of the GNS drivers, other than maybe Sean, who I almost wrecked. Sorry about that, Sean. But I think we definitely had a lot of pace compared to the people that were racing for the championship. But in terms of like Brian and Tucker, I mean, I just had nothing for them. So they were a lot faster than me all race, and I think Brian definitely deserved the win.
You did come into this race a bit on some high heels because you had the win at North Wilkesboro. You came into this race, get a second place, so the morale has to be up for your championship efforts. But given the fact that this race was a bit challenging on tires and everything, we saw a lot of drivers kind of struggle late in the run. How is your car feeling the entire time? And do you think that if you had a bit, if a caution had come out a little bit later, do you think that you might have been able to have a bit more fresher tires and have a bit more chance to get to the end of the race with maybe a potential win?
Maybe I could have gotten around Sean. I think I was definitely faster than him on the long runs because he pushed really early on, I think, banking on a lot of cautions. So I think I could have gotten around him. I pushed a little too hard on the second long green flag run we had, which kind of killed my tires before I could really get up to him and get around him. So that's, I don't know. I think that was a mistake on my part. On that first run, I ran a lot more conservatively at the early part of it and started working my way up a lot more slowly, and I think that definitely showed in my pace because I was able to keep up with Brian. But then on that second run, I think I just pushed too hard early on trying to keep up with Brian and Tucker, and they just drove away on the long runs. So the car felt really good on the long runs. I mean, it was a normal amount of struggle for Rockingham. I don't think I struggled any more than anyone else did or any less than anyone else did. I definitely felt good on tires and on the long runs, but just had nothing for Brian. So probably could have gotten around Sean, but definitely could not have driven up to Brian. He was just way better than everyone else on the long runs.
Well, nonetheless, a solid night for you, Jonathan. Qualifying up there in the 6th position, kept your car in the top 5 all night long, bringing it home with a second-place run just off the heels of your first career win last week. So, as I said when we brought you in here, the consistency, it's definitely there for the 73 car, and we look forward to seeing if you can carry this into the Tsukuba Nationals next week. But for the time being, we're going to turn the mic over to you for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Well, first off, I'd like to say, do not expect much out of me from the Tsukuba Nationals, because not only do I hate that track, I have no idea I just have no idea what's going to happen. So I could win or I could finish dead last. I don't even know what the format is, but I'll figure it out. Anyways, shout-outs. Yes, I have to give a shout-out to my teammates over at First Four Racing. Rudy put in a really strong performance, finishing in third. We got, I want to say, a couple of cars inside the top 10. I know CJ did a really good job throughout the race. I think Jack got a top 10. I think CJ was up there for a lot of it. Dorman is trying his best. But it's still really fun to come to the race weekends and get to hang out with my teammates and hopefully put on a good show for the fans and hopefully get some strong performances out of this team. We've been improving, I think, a lot over the past couple of months, going from fighting for top 20s to top 10s and now top 5s and wins and playoff points. So it's been great to be able to work with that team, and I got to give a huge shout out to them.
Well, that's Jonathan Oates, P2 here tonight at Rockingham Speedway. Continues to carry this momentum, and best of luck to you next week in those Sakuba Nationals. Hopefully this momentum carries you into a good finish in those upcoming road course races.
See, thank you, Seth.
Let's go down to victory lane. Third time this season, Brian Mercurio puts that Speed Incorporated Toyota Supra in victory lane. Hey, Brian, it's Anthony and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yep.
Well, man, we talk about the fact that this 62 is trying to keep itself up there at the top of the owner's standings. Your third trip to victory lane, but, if we kind of looked at your graph, it's consistently inside the top 5, but kind of fluctuated. You started on the pole, you fell back to 4th, then you move back up to the front, lose the lead again. Was that just all you running your race, making sure that you kept those tires in one piece, try to have them preserved for the long run and let other drivers do their thing, then pounced when it mattered the most?
Yeah, that's kind of my mindset, especially here at Rockingham. This tire model, super sensitive to tire heat, and Rockingham, you kind of almost have to treat it like Dover with your tires. The high banking kind of promotes you wanting to just kind of throw it in and let the banking catch you. But like I said, with just how sensitive this tire is to heat, doing so is going to heat up your tires super quick. And I just knew that I saw how hard they were running in the beginning, so I just figured I'm going to let them do their thing. I'll do my thing. I knew it was going to come back to me. We saw that first run. It eventually did. It took about 30-something laps, but it finally came back to me. Then the second run, exact same thing happened again with Jordan and Sean. So, yeah, like you said, I just ran my race and kind of picked up what people were doing on the short run to kind of, prep myself if we ever had that scenario, which is exactly what we had at the end. So I think it all worked out pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's a bit of a topsy-turvy race for a lot of drivers, but again, staying solid all night long was what you did tonight, and got a lot of momentum going into the next few races. But going into Rockingham, it was an interesting race to watch, particularly because we saw a mixed bag of different types of drivers that had to go through a long run. We've talked about tires all night long, but from your perspective, how did the car feel over a long run? Because we've gotten two different answers so far. So let's see what the third answer is.
I'd love to know what you guys heard, but I feel like I was actually one of the only people who was wearing out the right rear more than the right front. Like I said, I know I've done it before. I ran a 87 race, the NASCAR Legends Series, like months ago, and I don't know what I was doing, and I just drove the car way too hard and melted the right front. And ever since then, every time I come to Rockingham, I know exactly what not to do. So just by doing so, taking care of the tires, especially at the end there, right before that the caution happened between Tucker and Gary Waterworth, I was getting pretty loose off the corners, and every time after those long runs, I had worse wear on the right rear than the right front. So you could definitely drive yourself to be very tight, but I thought the car was pretty neutral. Overall, yeah, I'd say pretty neutral.
Obviously, I want to go back to 2 weeks ago when it was looking like it was going to be a battle between you and Josh Parker at Nashville. Obviously, we know the whole commitment cone thing that took place. It dropped you back to the back of the pack, and you got to think that Josh Parker was kind of breathing a sigh of relief because it looked like it was going to be one of your two Supers that was going to go to victory lane. If you fast forward to tonight's race, if this thing had gone green to the end, it looked like it was going to come down between you and Tucker Minter. Of course, Tucker getting hit with that late EOL. So how much of a sigh of relief were you breathing there, knowing he was not going to be on your back bumper for that final restart?
Yeah, that was nice. It would have been interesting to see what he could have done if he had a clean car and he not slid his tires after he got involved in his accident. But I was talking to Tucker there after the race, and he said he didn't even feel his tires were better than mine to begin with. I think he had to drive up through a few people even to catch up to where I was. So he said he was just kind of riding and seeing where I was. There were a few things that I saw that I could do better as we were running there. Kind of tried to I was pulling away just by a little bit, maybe by like half a tenth a lap or something like that, the final few laps before the caution came out. But Tucker said he was driving turn one a lot deeper than me, which I saw. He was charging entry super hard. Just my force of habit is just to back up the entry at one a lot. So I saw he was doing that. I was doing it my way. We were kind of even there, but I felt I was a lot stronger in 3 and 4, and that's kind of where I tried to make up all my time. So I don't know if Tucker could have gotten to me, but yeah, it would have been interesting. I felt super confident in the long run. I think you guys could probably say the same. I was just, I felt really good in preserving my tires and putting myself in a position to be competitive throughout the entirety of a fuel run. But yeah, and then like I said, I kind of learned what I needed to do on a short run, and we got one at the end. So I think I kind of learned what I needed to do over the course of the race, and just applied what I learned at the right time.
Brian, obviously FRN covered a big chunk of the Grand National Series schedule last season, a lot of road courses during our time calling those races, and we saw that you're really good when it comes to those left and right-hand corners. We're going to the Tsukuba Nationals next week. What's the confidence level there?
Man, that's going to be a weird weekend, but I'm really looking forward to it for the Mark Sabeka birthday bash. I don't know if I'll be in the 62. I might hand the keys over again to Blake. Blake loves the road courses, and we always love to try to get a good finish with the 62. So I'll have to talk to Blake, see if he wants to take over the 62 again. But either way, this is, regardless if I'm in the 62 or not, I'm definitely going to be, I'll run this race. Like I said, it's going to be a weird weekend, a lot of, kind of weird stuff, kind of out of the box, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy for sure. Very interesting format that's going to be coming up next week, and we're looking forward to seeing you take part in that. Brian Mercurio celebrates for the 3rd time here this season the FTF Grand National Series. This one tonight here at Rockingham Speedway. Brian, we're going to give you the opportunity now for some Victory Lane. Thank you, sponsors and shoutouts.
Give a big shout out to FTF for putting this race on. Big shout out to SRX for putting on a phenomenal show right before our race here over at Slinger. That was a great race to watch. Big shout out to Dale and Barr and Barr Visuals for sponsoring not only the series, but me personally. I've been a close friend of mine for a few years now. Want to thank Dalen for all he does for FTF and really sim racing in general. Loves to help out a bunch of people whenever he can. You guys for putting on the broadcast. And Low Line Racing, the team that I race for over here on iRacing, competing over in the Road to Pro Series, currently in round 2. DM Software Development and AI Manager for also being some sponsors of mine. And that's about it.
Well, that's Brian Mercurio. He's your winner here tonight in the Speed Visions 200 at Rockingham Speedway. Congratulations, Brian. Best of luck next week.
Thanks, guys.
And that's going to conclude our coverage here this evening from North Carolina Speedway, lovingly known by all the people around this area as The Rock. And Anthony, obviously out of the short track into the speedway type of racing now, and boy, we saw a lot of interesting strategy here. Some long green flag runs, a couple of short spurts there at the end, but the one constant was Brian Mercurio kept his car up there at the front, and as we heard, he just drove his own race. He made sure that he preserved his tires for the long run, and it worked out in his favor.
You hear a lot when drivers get to an interview is they say, well, I was just running my own race, and it's honestly an art form to watch drivers do that, to put out of their mind all the chaos that's happening around them. And obviously there was a huge pileup going down the front straightaway that brought out one of our cautions that for a driver to just not think about that throughout the race and, oh, what could have been me, or what if it happens again, that kind of stuff. And just being able to put your car where it needs to go, lap after lap, do it the best of your ability. And you end up winning races as Mercurio did, but he had some tough competition earlier in the race. And I do admit, if there was a few laps left, I think that some drivers might have been able to catch him, but there would have to have been a considerable amount of laps before they would have been able to do that.
Next week we're going to be going to the Tsukuba Nationals, the first time that road course makes an appearance on the Grand National Series schedule. I kind of cast my memory back to when Spa made its debut on the schedule back in Season 1. I'm looking here in the current point standings. A lot of guys jump out into the forefront of my sight here that I know are going to be very competitive when it comes to road courses. Andrew Schwartz, Kazuma Shinoshu, the guy we just talked to, Brian Mercurio, Jake Poulin. These are guys that ran up towards the front in a lot of the road course races last season. But we talked with Jonathan Oates, and he said, man, I don't know what to expect going into that race. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to do a lot of research this week, look into, how this format's going to be. It's a kind of unorthodox in terms of road course racing, but you got to wonder just how many drivers are of that same mentality of, man, I don't know what to expect when we get to Tsukuba next week.
Hey, it's going to be one of those scenarios where these drivers are going to have to feel out what to do as it's happening. And we have a couple of races that are like that still to come this season. Mount Panorama is one of them. But yeah, when we get to the Tsukuba Nationals, you better hold on. It's going to be pretty fun to watch these drivers try to figure out a new race format. Maybe not for them. They might have had some experience, but for us, it's going to be a bit challenging and a bit fun to watch them have to work their way around those circuits.
No doubt about it. Hope you guys will be joining us for that, as Flatout Racing Network is going to bring you coverage of those Tsukuba Nationals next Saturday night with the green flag flying at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Going to be multiple races during the course of that evening, so you're going to get some more bang for your buck. Anthony, it's been a great one here tonight, though, at Rockingham. We saw it kind of play out into strategy. Some nice long green flag runs here this evening that ended with a very exciting finish. Mercurio, the winner here tonight, third win of the season here in the FTF Grand National Series presented by Barr Visuals. I appreciate you joining me in the booth.
It's always fun to watch some good racing, and it's always fun to go back to Rockingham with some of these modern cars, and I can't wait to see how the rest of the season plays out because it's getting pretty intense.
It definitely is. Thank you to everybody that tuned in tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage here from Rockingham Speedway. We'll see you guys next week for the Tsukuba Nationals here for the FTF Grand National Series. For Anthony McCurry, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoy